In today's episode, I'm very excited to explore with you yet another dimension of inclusion, that related to territorial development. In this episode, I had a tremendous opportunity to speak with Wiktor Szydarowski, one of the directors at ESPON, and discuss the future of territorial development in the EU and how inclusion at macro level is still all about people. So let's delve in. Hello and welcome to Inclusive Urban Futures. Today I have an absolute honor to be speaking with Wiktor Szydarowski, the director of ESPON. And for those people who don't really know what ESPON stands for, my first question for you would be, what is ESPON?
Interesting question, because many people tend to think we deliver printing supplies as Epson. It's even some name affiliations like Epson, not precisely the inquiries about how much and how quick we can deliver in order to ease the office life. But it has something to do that the people might misinterpret us as something, in a commercial company. Actually, ESPON is a very interesting program co-funded by the EU and the plethora of member states. So all EU member countries and also 4 partner countries of Iceland, Norway, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein. And all these different countries are interested in having a better policy making, more informed policy making, more inspirational policy making, to understand the territorial trends, the territorial challenges, the territorial patterns, and also the consequences of the policy-making decisions. So ESPON is the program that brings together researchers, practitioners, and policy stakeholders, so that the future policies are more place-based, territorially non-blind. You can use whatever phrase we want here. So they understand that there is a context in everything that we are deciding about. Again, you may ask the question what ESPON program is about, and because we work closely with the policymakers and the researchers, sometimes people understand it, well, the first and foremost client or community members for ESPON is actually researchers. This is not true. We are not a research program. We are not Horizon Europe. We deal with researchers, of course, but we use the competence of researchers in order to then direct the recommendations into policy-making world. So with my coming to the ESPON, the idea has grown that we should actually reverse a little bit, in the sense that ESPON program must be more and more based on policy needs. And sometimes you need to work on those policy needs because the countries, the stakeholders, be it the EU level, the macro-regional level, the national, the regional, local, might not know that they perhaps would need ESPON at one point, certain day. This is why we are coming proactively to them saying, we have a certain catalog of our services. We have policy briefs, we have reports, we have case studies, and you may go through these and see if they are interesting for you, not only because of colorful cover pages, but because of the content. We can organize a similar service for you, so that when you feel you are in need, you are in the process of creating your policies, and you have to know what the others are doing, if your territory is specific or is it just a usual territory that have many other peer regions around. So you want us to connect you to that knowledge. You may use us, and then we'll organize a service. So we are somewhere in between this world of researchers. And I tried also to use a metaphor that ESPON is like a meandering river that we need to change all the time to adapt to the circumstances and to the needs. And not that we come and say, we just produce a nice booklet of, a report, a book of reports, say 600 pages. please go and read it. That's very interesting. No one has time for it. No one has time to read 600 pages, in particular in the administration, in the policy world. So we need to find attractive that is teasing the policy-making world, so that the very difficult, sometimes very academic language that the researchers are putting into their reports is really understandable by the users, by those that should live with the consequences. So this is what ESPON is about. And actually, one more important information, that I'm not the director of ESPON program, I'm director of ESPON EGTC. We are a kind of a single-purpose vehicle that has its mission in implementing the ESPON program. So we are a single beneficiary, if you talk in the program in project terms, that once in 7 years applies for being this sort of implementing body for the ESPON program. And if the interest of the member states in our competence tool persists, then we are offered yet again contract to run yet another ESPON program. And this has been our journey for, quite a number of. ESPON is going to celebrate 20 years of its existence next year.
Another question, you were talking about policy change, and that you have to, the ESPON needs to change and meander, and just looking at the date when you ascended to being in your position, which was last year, in one of the most challenging years that we know in the recent history. So I was just wondering, how has that been, and what has been your decision to, take on this responsibility now, when, in the year of 2020, that has been really difficult by every single dimension. So how, first of all, I just wanted to know, I guess the burning question here is, how does one take that responsibility in this year? Why? How does it feel? And what is happening in the world of policymaking? What is the effect that this year had on you?
There has been awkward situation that the recruitment process had been open before the COVID pandemic. So the submission date, if I remember correctly, was about the middle of March 2020, where I think the entire world used to think this is just a seasonal thing that's going to end before we have a beautiful summer plans in 2020, including me. So I got the recruitment offer in early July 2020, with the agreement I would start working for ESPON in early September. And already then, all interviews, so interview rounds, were organized online, even though they had preliminarily been thought to be organized on site in Luxembourg. I've traveled a lot around Europe, but I've never been to Luxembourg. I've never been to Luxembourg before. So that was a situation I was faced with, that I would go straight to work in Luxembourg, the country that I don't know, with the organization, the people of which I don't know, because I just saw some faces through the online interviews, and I understood that some of them had some role with ESPON, members in the monitoring committee, because usually when recruiting for the managerial position, member states representatives are present. And then when I arrived, actually the decision was not easy, of course, because it made a lot of changes in my private life as well, in my family life. We agreed that I would then come first and alone to work in Luxembourg for roughly 1 year to see if I liked it or not. And then if the answer were positive, then I would then decide to bring my family with me, which now happens 1 year later in early September 2021. We also had a lot of discussion on how often I could still go back to Sweden, where I had resided before, to see my family. And because of the COVID restrictions, it was more and more difficult to travel. I had routes and different modes of transport to commute, say once a month for a couple of days between Luxembourg and Sweden. And one extreme situation was that because of many contradictory and inconsistent COVID checks, different tests, PCR antigen, 72 hours, 48 hours, 4 hours, depending on the country concerned. In this extreme case, I actually rented a car and then drove from Luxembourg to Sweden and back, which is still fine because Germany was not in the fate of transit travelers. So they were never checked at the border. It was the easiest, of course, for me to avoid being checked a number of times and with different tests on me to travel via different airports. Here I found a situation that a lot of colleagues were actually working online only because of the COVID. The teleworking scheme was installed, but people rather avoided coming to the office, even though there was not a full lockdown. So I had to organize from the general staff meeting in one big meeting room to introduce who I am, what I'm doing, what I want to do with the team, but having sort of an ad hoc meetings with the colleagues one by one to understand the priorities and also to understand how the work should be organized in the way that would enable better interaction and communication between people. I mean, teleworking is quite attractive, but the downside of it, as you know quite well, is that you lose this sort of a possibility for spontaneous interaction with the people to draw on certain, standpoint and then immediately discuss what we can do together. Are we well in terms of our deadlines, our quality management, and so on? So I decided actually to come to the office every day and stay at the office every day, not being that much afraid of the COVID repercussions. And I think it helped a lot for me to understand and what to improve in the team performance. And then also to gain confidence from the people, because with the new head of the office or director, you also have some anticipations, but also you have some concerns or worries about the personality he or she is going to impose on the entire team. That might be either autocratic, bureaucratic, or completely relaxed. I tried to instill also the Nordic way of cooperating, as I lived 18 years in Sweden before. So I like it, puts a certain twist on it. So not to endlessly discuss the things until we get the compromise, but to let everyone express their opinion, then suggest a solution and ask if this solution sits well with everyone. If not, we can still try to adjust it a little bit so that everyone feels comfortable. But to not to drag the discussion into the blurry future, so that everyone at the end should be extremely happy with it, because we also work with some sort of a time pressure on our activities, and we can't extend such discussions forever. But so I said from the very outset, that my door is always open. If it's shut, it means I'm in the telework meeting, I'm in the online meeting, or busy with some preparations. Otherwise, I'm not, the autocratic director that actually knows everything best and no one is to question it.
Yeah. I mean, what has been your, kind of most challenging, part of this kind of entry in this role, in this time? What has been your challenge or advantage as a leader, being in this very challenging time?
I think the ability of understanding the different work cultures because of our backgrounds. Just to give example, not from our courtyard, absolutely. I spoke to my Swedish colleagues that went for a study trip to northern Italy. And then they witnessed an exchange of arguments between two Italians that were calling themselves idiots. And next days, they were best friends again. So they read these Swedes, poor Swedes, reported back to me, they were calling themselves idiots. Imagine if I called someone in my, work environment an idiot, I would be immediately, expelled. I would be immediately judged as really abusive, offensive, and I have to probably go for a therapy that would be then ordered by my employer to cope with my emotions, with my feelings, and so on. So this is also something that through my networking experience with different programs and projects over more than 20 years, I tried to accommodate also. I've never been a civil servant per se. I've been always a process manager. And to also understand, the emotions, the feelings, the thoughts, the cultures, the way people express themselves, also fortunately helped me avoid any, escalation of conflicts, which is very easy because people come uneasy to work because of the COVID, because of the uncertainty about the infection rate, what's going on with their close relatives and family members who are in some other countries very often. And these colleagues of mine cannot travel back because of the restrictions, because of the need to quarantine themselves. So also to put certain, tame on these emotions has been extremely important in the first months when I came to work for ESPON. And also to understand the architecture, because decision makers are the monitoring committee members, representing all these different ESPON member countries. So they decide, we propose, they decide. It's not that we decide on the strategic directions. We decide on implementing directions in the sense of, daily management decisions. But they have the upper hand with regards to the strategic decisions on the program. And also, on the other hand, we are not a joint secretariat. We are not a part of the Luxembourgish administration, based on the private law. And we have the EGTC assembly, so a sort of supervisory board composed of the Luxembourgish ministry and the three Belgian regions. So we also need to consult some staff and work-related issues with them. So it's very difficult also from the very outset to understand where the line goes between the program implementation things and the daily environment-related things that need to be consulted with yet another organization.
You mentioned different cultures, you mentioned different ways of doing things. You also mentioned afterwards basically working across the board with different member states. So that means communicating on daily basis with people from different countries, from different cultural backgrounds. And that brings me back to the question of asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself. And where does that understanding and compassion for different ways of doing things come from?
Well, I'm geographer and regional planner. So I graduated University in Gdańsk in Poland, where I actually, my primary interest lied with the mountains. And, landscape, mountains, a part of geography which is called geomorphology. It's about land relief, very often related with, post-glacial sediments. So this was my major for the master degree with the university. In those times, it was not possible, and probably to a certain extent, it is not possible to live just on the university wages because they are so low in many countries. So then I took another job with the different organizations that dealt with the regional policy issues. And then I was slowly introduced, or gradually, not slowly, but introduced to the Baltic Sea region development matters. not in terms of environment, but the regional policy, spatial planning, and so on and so forth. And one day, a colleague of mine, a CEO, you have to choose between your interest in this, quaternary geology, land use, geomorphology, and the regional policies in the broader geographical sense. I, of course, immediately opposed that crazy idea. I thought I could be doing both, which turned out not to be possible, and he was absolutely right. So I decided to dedicate my full time to the spatial planning and regional development matters across the borders, basically. So I started getting involved with different projects and different initiatives that relied very much on networking. Being junior, of course, it's not easy because then your immediate idea is, well, now I have to say something publicly, how I should formulate it in English so that everyone pays attention to what I'm going to say. But then slowly, by rehearsing, repeating, being more and more involved in those different cooperation networks, I think that I managed to cope with that sort of a difficulty of, connecting the people from different cultures and countries. So I started assuming different managerial positions with the programs and projects, predominantly in the Baltic Sea area, but not only. And then this understood to grow in me, because the way that you organize the work in Germany is much different to Sweden, it's much different to Russia, it's much different to the Baltic states nowadays. So you also need to understand how the things are organized, who takes decisions, and then what you can expect in different meetings. In some of these meetings, you can expect that the people come prepared and mandated to issue a decision that you are facilitating. In some others, they will say, no, I have to consult it with my boss, and the boss of my boss, and the boss of my boss of my boss. So put it into
I'm just the permanent representation anyway.
Yes, exactly. So there are different cultures, there are different working environments, and this helps a lot if you have known it, to come and work for ESPON that works with all different cultures, from west to east, from north to south. And each country is not alike, basically, in terms of decisions and expectations. Some countries are very well prepared to take from ESPON what ESPON can offer. Some countries require some helping hand from us in presenting to them what possibly could be the service. The same as you are having a process of scoping a project or activity with an organization. Depends on you also how proactive you are in offering some solution. So this process management thing helps a lot in facilitating our daily life, I would say. And I'm quite at my communication, so I never prepare myself for speech or presentations. I like improvising. I also had an episode, I was lecturer at the University of Gdansk, so also instead of having kind of routine lectures, I used to try to ignite discussion, to draw students into discussing the things, of presenting their own standpoints. It's much more interesting than just, lecturing ex cathedra to the people that are just expected to obey and listen.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. As a fellow part-time academic as well, yeah, it's much more interesting because somehow I find that everyone has something to say. Everybody actually has a piece of knowledge that the other one doesn't have, and therefore I wouldn't have. And therefore, if you ignite people to talk about the things and their opinions, everybody learns. And I think I totally agree with you on that. I was just thinking, we were talking about all these different ways to manage stuff, and considering what Europe has been going through before, COVID-19 and losing one state and stuff like that. What would be your summary of like how to work across Europe together? Like one summary of like how we communicate and and collaborate in diversity.
I think people appreciate you being open and transparent, and it goes irrespective of the working culture. If they put trust in you, if they become confident that what you are saying to them will be done for them, then I think that with many member states. What we organized, for instance, in the first month of my of me assuming the position was that we had one-to-one virtual coffee meetings with the member states. Very informal, similar to this interview, that we set the both ends of the line and then discuss, what kind of priorities they have, we might be having for them, what is of concern, what is that they are interested in ESPON, what is that they are perhaps not that happy about ESPON. Very open, very transparent discussion. And if they see the consequence that there is a step, a decision, a stage where from that specific moment we take a certain action which is consistent with what we have been discussing in those meetings, then this confidence grows, right? It's not just, empty abstract talking, blah, 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 but in fact there is certain action to the discussion or on that discussion taken. So I think this they appreciate it a lot. They appreciate also if you revert on the inquiries, that as they are actually ESPON's main target groups, right? The policy stakeholders. And we organize it either directly with the specific local regional authorities or who have representatives in the monitoring committee. So the transparency, the openness, the iterative communication with your target groups, and also quick communication, that we don't keep them waiting. Then they will lose interest in what you are offering, what you are doing. They have some other interesting things, interesting measures to take care of. I'm always saying that we need to spend our 5 minutes in an efficient way. Otherwise, there is someone else who will come and ask for the 5 minutes.
That's correct, yes.
Same when you have different meetings that you get invitations to and you need to choose. Either you pick up ESPON or you pick up someone else for your 5 minutes.
That's correct, and especially I find that this is true in the world of Zooming. I think that we are much more clinical about choosing whether we need that additional Zoom, because usually it's much more pleasant to meet people. I just wanted to ask you, what is your mission as a director of your section of ESPON? What is your mission, and what inspired you to join the organization? You said that before you were an academic, you worked also in afterwards in consulting. What inspired you to come and lead this organization, and what is your mission?
I had an adventure with ESPON before. So many years ago, I got invitation to sit on something which is called sounding board for one of the ESPON projects. And this was to review the findings in that project from the policy use perspective. Then came another invitation. So I was on 2 projects altogether. And I'm geographer, so the geography comes together. So I was always interested in working across borders in different programs and projects. So when this territorial dimension came in with ESPON information on recruitment, then I decided to give it a go. Mm-hmm. As for my mission, actually I have to. I'm responsible for the daily operation of the ESPON EGTC. So 20 plus colleagues that deal with the specific thematic activities as so-called project experts. Also, we have financial experts. We also have to deal with some administrative matters, of course. And first and foremost, my mission internally is to ensure good working environment for the entire team, which is not easy because there are many expectations about working conditions, the salary conditions. And we are not a commercial organization that works on profits and then can pay out dividends or bonus installments to the colleagues who work. But we work on a strict budget decided by the program's monitoring committee. So our say maneuver is quite limited. So it was also part of my communication to many colleagues that unfortunately this is the case. Right? And yes, so surprise to some of the colleagues, but not any surprise to any other colleagues. So also I then tried to kind of level it out so that all colleagues understood the working framework for the ESPON EGTC. Externally, my main assignment is to communicate and promote ESPON. So I'm not involving myself in individual thematic activities on a data project experts, not even as the head of units or heads of units. I, of course, go in here and there to have the better knowledge, but my major assignment lies with translating it to the communication language. So the task I got in one of my interviews for the recruitment was to go into a quite bulky report produced by ESPON, and then imagine that I have to prepare myself for a presentation of the ESPON to some stakeholders. So I was given 1 hour then to prepare a 5-minute speech, 5 to 10 minute speech, based on the report I hadn't known. So this is also the ability, to extract information that is of vital importance for the audience, and then to communicate it in the way that is attractive, that is appealing, and that stays with the audience. So this is one of our major missions as the director, externally, to communicate ESPON, to speak ESPON, to, you can say, then recruit people for ESPON in the sense of expanding the ESPON community that still has the certain label of being a hermetic, quite confined community for national ministries. Maybe some regions here and there, but not commonly. So my role is also then to, see that ESPON speaks a lighter language, delivers some products that, depending on your competence, you can go and read 600 pages long documents or 10 pages long abstract or brief. Because depending on who you are, you have more or less time. Usually you have 5 minutes, right? Yeah. So this is also that I need to understand also how then to interact with the audience of ESPON, the community of ESPON. And well, I'm trying to do so.
I'm just wondering, how did COVID-19 the last year affect the world of territorial and sectoral policies in the EU? We know that we have a new commission, new parliament, new period for the cohesion policy, new budget that has been voted, and a situation that we never had before. So I was just wondering, how, from your perspective, what have you seen? How did the situation affect the world of territorial development and sectoral policies?
We have all seen it through the kind of freezing of flows. So the flows, the interregional flows, the country-to-country flows were never the same after the pandemic.
You mean by people or product or?
The people, the products, not perhaps the ideas, because with the Zooming business, I think that the ideas have been growing a lot, but the physical flows across the space almost came to full halt. And then also the individual choices, the preferences of people were manifesting themselves, as you are very well aware, in decisions. Well, we don't want to live in big cities anymore, it's dangerous. We want to find, because now it's possible to telework, so we can find for the same price as the apartment we are having now in the old town, in the downtown, we can buy a bigger house at the outside. in the suburban area with nice green areas around us, close to forest perhaps, and good facilities also for us to stay and live and thrive. And then we also, I think, noticed in this territorial development the exposure of some social groups to being isolated, to being excluded. That's your question about this inclusive growth, inclusiveness or exclusiveness as the other extreme. That because of the lack of access, the lack of facilities, the lack of competences, these people have been or have actually turned to be on the verge of being isolated, left behind. So this was the immediate threats that we noticed also about the territorial development that became much more polarized in terms of how we and our governments, our authorities can cope with the crisis. We also studied that within ESPON, that some of them were quicker to react, but usually through so-called defensive measures. So, try to extinguish the consequences of COVID in terms of, the salaries, saving some industry branches and so on. And some others were more proactive, but very few at that stage with the first wave, to try to capitalize on this, new COVID situation, to organize some better facilities for the people to work on a remote basis, to take care also of some new ways of the tourism. There's also been a shift of paradigm, I would say, in tourism. I don't think that we are back to this mass tourism, that we need to see those big cruise ships in the Mediterranean to the extent we had seen before COVID. And this is what we detected also in territorial development, that many authorities said, we can cope, we have some good ideas, we have some good think tanks, and some others said, we need some help and advice, how to reorganize, how to rethink our future because of the COVID. Then I think more and more we have seen that the word resilience came into being, how we could be more resilient, not in terms of our health issues, but in terms of our decisions, lifelong decisions. Again, I don't think that those people that decided to migrate from the downtown areas would go back to the downtown areas. I think they will be very happy to continue living in the suburban areas. Of course, provided that they have services they need. And this is another area, right, of our interest, territorial development, that as the people made their choices, made their priorities, then in order to attract them to the area we want them to attract, we need to provide certain services. Also for the elderly people who are not able to move or don't want to move, but also that actually are probably well-off people, well-to-do, but they want to actually bind their future life with our place. So as decision maker, I need to provide the right working living conditions for those senior and those more junior, more competent or incompetent people. So I have a mixture of the needs that I need to cope with. Mm.
We lived by the premise, I think majority of international organizations were aligning themselves to this UN finding that by 2050, majority of the world population will be living in cities. So I'm just wondering, I mean, you already gave a little bit of a taste of the trend that you see or perceive, but just does that premise still hold? Does it? Or we are kind of moving to another type of a world, and to what extent this is in fact possible, considering that all the services that you were mentioning?
Depends on the country, depends on the mindset, I think, and also on these governmental provisions. Just an example, maybe two extreme examples. Imagine the country that is already heavily populated but still sees the inflow of people into cities because it's easier to get a job, because it's easier perhaps to organize yourselves in a group of people, organize some small, grassroots communities in the districts of a big city. So it's probably even the cost of living could be not that difficult and heavy to bear. So I think this will be unavoidable that in some countries we'll still see this process as before, that the cities are going to grow. In some other areas where people are more individualistic, where also the official framework is that you should yourself organize this sort of equality of life, conditions, and the government is only to assist you, then I think it will be more on individual preferences and choices. So you see the people that will say, okay, I don't mind living in a small town because I have very good internet facilities there. It's green, it's not noisy, it's peaceful and quiet. And also my kids have very good growth opportunities with high-level social care, school care or kindergarten care services. I have access to the health facilities, even online. It really doesn't matter where I live. This happens already in Estonia, as we recently heard an interesting story about this e-government development in the country, where the primary mission of the government is to ensure the access to the services, no matter where you live within the country borders. You can live on the remote island, you can live in the center of Tallinn. It doesn't really matter. It's of secondary importance. So if we see this sort of, mindset also from the governments to follow your individual preferences, but then provide you with the access to services, then I think that we not necessarily need to, still populate the cities. We'll be living probably in the vicinity to the cities, not even perhaps in the very suburbs. It could be a bit farther away, but still within the certain, I would say, conventional distance that, once a week or once every 2 weeks, workplace, wherever your workplace is, or some physical meetings, because I do believe that the physical meetings still have certain purpose.
Mm. So we will find the shift. I'm just wondering what, and I according to my recent research, that I feel that would be very much applicable to medium and high income population groups.
Yes.
But what happens to the low income that actually depend very much? I mean, whose jobs pretty much are based on contact, who cannot work remotely, or who are not skilled to work remotely, or perhaps the territories in the EU that are not so digitally equipped.
Well, precisely, but I think we are at the point of no return with digitalization services, right? It's very basic thing. I would say that because of the COVID, many generations, many age groups learned how to deal with digital services, right? Because of, kind of a very natural to go to the office and know that I need to make an appointment first and come only if really, really needed. Same as the mobile phones, I think that first it was regarded by the elderly people as something that they were never going to master as the new technique. But if there are some good services, there is some good courses, if there are some good provisions made in place, I think that this barrier is soon over. But of course, you are right that for of proximity of contact is very necessary. But then there is another paradigm I think that we need to change, which is that we need to counteract the population at any cost. What we promoted through ESPON is that the population decline is unavoidable because people make their choices. What we need to do is to provide the services to the people that live there, that might continue living there, but we are not able to fight the population or demographic changes.
You mean migration to migration? Is what you?
Yes, because you are not going to actually put some sort of fence a village and say you are not allowed to migrate.
Yeah.
This is your decision. This is your decision, of course, what you want to do with your life. But for that, the authorities need to understand something, again, that we call the quality of life, the perception of the quality of life. So I would imagine that the enlightened authorities organize dialogue with the citizen groups in their territory, asking them how you perceive your quality of life. What is what you are missing? What is what you are lacking? Some things we can probably provide for you. Basic services, maybe more sophisticated services. It doesn't necessarily have to be the road infrastructure. Might be something else that you would need. We can make a compromise on, I put it right now in quotes, on how to keep the majority of you in our place, in our territory. Not everyone, because we are not able to. It's your choice. But so that you can still say you live a decent life and you want to stay and reside here. If you're an elderly person, what is that you need in terms of your health, social care issues? Can we organize also some sort of a networking for you? And in case you are not able, or you fear, you're afraid of, so that you may also say you live a decent life. These are fundamental questions, but before COVID, we had been so much, fascinated with economic growth, GDP per capita things, that we never looked at these individual perceptive things that I think are very important, because the people then vote and decide, more or less.
I'm absolutely with you on this. I think that GDP and macroeconomics, I mean, of course, have their function, but have been to an extent overused, especially on issues that are on a micro scale, where different methods are used. I mean, different methods can be used. I mean, different methods should be applied to understand the details of them. But also, most importantly, which there are many other different methods to understand the world, not only the macroeconomic theory and one indicator that it deals with. I just wanted to move to the key question, actually, of our conversation today, is that how do you we have this inclusion as a concept that kind of became more and more important, in discussions about recovery from COVID-19 in businesses and policy. So I just wanted to ask you, what does the concept of inclusion mean to you? How do you interpret it?
Well, we have a motto in the territorial development I fully subscribe to, that no place and no one should be left behind. Of course, it's a very poetic and a very metaphysical formulation, but I think it has some sense in it, that in order to ensure inclusiveness, you need to go and ask every single person how she or he would like to be part of the development. It's not an easy task, of course, and it's not possible that you do it literally, that, say, you have an area with 500,000 inhabitants and you organize a meeting every single person. But somehow you can do it through some community groups, the NGOs, that I think should be, to a larger degree, involved in discussing the future of our area. Not just that you speak to your civil servants as the head or a mayor or a Lord Mayor, but you speak to the citizen groups, you speak to the neighborhoods, you speak to the districts. We have also seen, and I think this is also obvious for many people dealing with urban development, huge diversities in perceiving things between the different districts within the city limits. It's very much polarized, and also depend on the age group, depends also on the ethnicity, depends on the cultural background, the educational competence, and so on. So how to organize that? I think this is now a sort of a philosopher's stone that we need to try to find. In ESPON, we are organizing this pilot activity. We've been carrying out a pilot activity of territorial quality of life living labs to gather the groups representing these different, backgrounds, representing these different, perceptions, to try then to discuss what the quality of life means and how we can base our policies on your expectations. So perhaps this is a quasi-inclusiveness in the sense that then the different groups, the different stockings of people actually need to be consulted about the future. This could be organized physically. This could be also organized online to a certain extent, although we know that not everyone is so prone and interested in answering the zillions of surveys he or she receives every day, because it's also attractive for the issuers of service to ask questions and then expect answer, but it's not that easy. So we need to find also some new communication methods to involve the people on the ground in discussing so that they feel included in the development. Because it's very easy to lose them when they regard themselves, not contacted, not talked to in a transparent way. If we are not able to build trust between the authority and the citizens, which, as you know, is different country to country. This mutual trust level is extremely high in the Nordic countries, for instance, when you trust your administration and the government. In the Mediterranean countries, it's the opposite. Mm. You trust your family, but not the administration or the government. Mm. So there is no one-size-fits-all policy or approach here. I think that will be probably sort of in need of experimenting a lot with those sort of living labs, or some way to organize some forum for the citizens, for the NGOs to come and speak and present their views. But I think that these days of arbitrary decisions are, in many countries at least, are coming to an end. Because otherwise, the geography of this content will be even larger. This is also the fear in many countries, that many groups, many communities feel actually, and then they oppose the decisions by the government, be it about the vaccination, be it about some other post-COVID remedies. They don't want to be actually part of it because of some reasons. We need to understand the reasons.
That's absolutely correct, and it is also fascinating because the general assumption always is that territorial development is large scale, and now you're thinking about how to go to the level of a person. I'm just wondering, what are the in the view of COVID, and especially kind of this ambition for inclusion, or said ambition for the inclusion for the future? What is the state of art of territorial development and policies now according to your opinion, and what is still missing? What is this sector still missing? To be able to kind of live to the ambition of inclusive recovery. What are we still missing? Is this solution inquiry that you were talking about sufficient, or there's some more issues that you would personally would like to see addressed?
I'm somewhat concerned that the territorial mantra is spelled out to be already converted to the people that understand very well what the territorial development is about and the territorial dimension. But there are still many sectors that still do a lot of things in the way they used to do, right? Without any clue, any interest in the territorial dimension. So this territorial versus sectoral is, I think, a sort of a battle that we need still to have. still need to run, so that fewer and fewer sectors are talking sectoral language and speak more territorial language.
Can you give an example?
Just to give an example, during the Portuguese presidency of the EU Council, our colleagues from the Portuguese Ministry for Territorial Development, we approached their respective colleagues responsible for the agricultural development. And this was one of the very effective encounters where we involved them in discussing the future of the rural shrinking regions, which you would say could be absolutely a sectoral thing, that we have some agricultural problems in many areas, less and less growth is based on agriculture. We have to do something with the people, the farming industry, and so on. And it has a version that it is difficult to actually convince the sectoral ministry, the line ministry, to take care of or to deal with, because it's always nicer and always easier to work according to our routines in our ministry. But I think that we were persuasive or effective enough to instill this territorial thinking into the works of the Ministry of Agriculture. But the same goes for many commission services as well. It's very difficult to say everything that we do has or is going to have some territorial implications. So we need to, depart and try to get rid of the silo thinking and the silo doing, which is not an easy thing at all levels of governance. So we very much promote this territorial governance. It's not only multi-level governance that, all these sectors from the local to the European work together, but also territorial means that we work across the borders. We think of our development in terms of the functional area, because even though there are administrative borders, but still functionally, we belong to the same entity. Because the world does not end with the borders, our administrative borders.
Maybe some of them put there 500 years ago.
Well, yeah,
and some of them changed yesterday.
Yes, but this is a never-ending story. Probably that we will always have to discuss this territorial governance, the territorial dimension, with more, maybe not more and more, but still with a lot of people that don't appreciate that some territorial people actually meddle with their business because they want to do the things as they had been doing for so much time. So it's so easy to stick to the routines,
Right. So basically, if I'm trying to translate this to be understood wider. So basically, we're talking about a spillover effect, isn't it? Like when we're thinking, for instance, about housing prices, isn't it? We would have a global or a capital city having a specific quite high housing price, but then the neighboring municipalities will have an impact on their housing prices as well. So if we want to imagine an average housing price would just kind of flow over the administrative border as a spilled glass of water, just go over, not respecting the lines of a municipality, right?
Absolutely. The flows, the processes never respect the administrative borders, if you want it or not. I once spoke to a Swedish politician who said to me, the infrastructural investments in the neighboring country, because I know that I will have to live with the consequences. So imagine, this is something that we would like very much to see applied in the mindset of decision making, to know what the others around me are doing, because it might be and will be important for me as well to cope with. You say spillover effects could be also consequences, detrimental consequences.
Yeah.
That I lose some part of my labor force that might go to some other places, that my retailers may lose their profits because of a retailing center opening in the municipality nearby, or an important transport hub, logistics center is going to be built in the neighboring region. Then the flows will be different. So for my companies, from my territory, I need to understand it. to know what I'm supposed to do with it.
Mm. That's true, and I'm just thinking that I think that if we're talking about that, even there was this concept of competition between local authorities to attract population. Kind of that was a discourse. It's an old discourse, I think, over 20 years, if not more. And I always had a problem with that because that is driven by taking, kind of like almost like, well, attractive people to one city. That's all fine. But what about the purpose and the fact what you were saying that, that might affect the sub-region that might not be within the lines, and maybe in that case, both local authorities might be losing something because they're. But
Yes, we have this standard phrase of win-win situation that is also something that many authorities, many decision makers need to learn. That, if, for instance, I, in quotes, I lose for workplaces that go to the neighboring municipalities, still perhaps I can profit from it somehow. I need to understand how I could profit from it. But it's not that I lose it. It's not, win-lose situation. Can I offer them some nice residential areas, perhaps? Because I see it from the territorial analysis that my area is very good. It has pristine environment. It has certain assets, territorial assets that I can win on. I can offer to the people that would like to settle down in my area, not necessarily to work in my area, but to settle down.
Yeah, it was just something crossed my mind right now when we were talking about is that obviously historically dividing a country into sub regions and municipalities was the analog way in a way to develop and rule, because you didn't have a vision. We didn't have the maps you have, for instance, of mapping and knowing and seeing what is going on. Where is that spillover effect or effect? And they especially 100, 200 years ago, there was no tool, but we still live with the same administrative borders or similar ones, or the similar concept. And somehow what you're saying to me is the digital variant of the development. Like this is like development, the how to say, governance 202, where it's a different way of spin on development. When we have more information and we know better because we have better evidence. Because honestly, when I started my work 20 years ago, I think in architecture and real estate, I saw a real estate crash that happened because of .com bubble burst. And I was really disappointed that that thing affected the real estate industry. And then I was kind of wanting to understand how housing market works. Something that an architect wouldn't know, how these prices kind of develop, what is going on there, And I started to dig for that because I wanted some answers that I didn't have at the time. And I had to travel at the time from one country to another to see that there is a system to actually map over an administrative border and see what is going on, right? Of course, this was much larger scale. It was a global impact and so on and so forth. But I think that what you're saying is absolutely important, and really what you were underlying, that is something that we really have to kind of really embrace more seriously in the future, because the knowledge exists.
Absolutely, the knowledge exists. We, of course, need to reap the benefits of the knowledge existence. We call this evidence, but of course need to translate it into knowledge, and knowledge into decision making. And how to find it, how to actually use this opportunity of the available evidence and then speak to decision makers is something that we also then try to implement with ESPON. That we are not that highly academic. We have some policy advice. We just want to see that the fora are arranged in which we could just, promote what we have found together with the researchers based on the specific policy needs, because it may turn out that a decision maker is in a similar situation, those that actually requested the service. So some of the solutions could be also applicable to their situation without the need of, starting the investigation, making the broad analysis all over again. So in terms of, the time between the analysis and the production of recommendation and then also putting them into life, this time we can actually save by looking at the good examples and learn from the others. So this learning, dimension is extremely important. And also, that we abandon things because we represent two different administrative units, but we think about us because we live in the same functional area. We can both win on some processes if we work together.
Well, we're moving toward the end. I wanted to ask you, what is the achievement that you're specifically very proud of?
Well, that's a very difficult question. I think that I started promoting this sort of human face of ESPON, that you people, that you listen to what they could expect from ESPON, and you're opening up to new audiences. So you dehermetize ESPON. I wouldn't say this has been an achievement made already. I think that together with the team of very, very competent colleagues here, we are now attempting to open it up. We start on-demand services for the member states, meaning that we first listen to what kind of timely policy needs they have, and we then offer the customized solution, which they appreciate a lot. And thereby we are building the trust between the member states and the ESPON EGTC, which is going to profit in the future if we are the ones to be selected for running yet another ESPON program, this time 2030 program. So it will be then easier for us to engage them in the ESPON activities. We learned that perhaps this is not the rocket science, that these representatives of the member states in the monitoring committee have many other tasks and assignments on their desks. They are not solely working for ESPON 100% of the time. And perhaps some recipe that they have not 5 minutes, by 7 minutes for ESPON. So this is my personal ambition. 7 minutes, not 5 minutes.
Okay. The last question I wanted to ask you is that if you would share one important message with the audience of Inclusive Urban Futures, what would it be?
I think that we need to be really good at listening, and also to understand what the people around us are doing, how we can make use of it together with the people around us, and how we can build something together with those. So even if we are getting very individualistic in our behaviors, which has been extremely common in the COVID times, still there are some bonds, there are some networks that we need to cultivate, and that then we'll build this, critical mass for achieving the success together. So this togetherness is an important thing. Also, when we want to have people behind us. Otherwise, you can be a lone rider, but I don't think it is going to be sustainable as a matter of fact.
Thank you very much for this. I think it was really inspiring to speak with you today. I have learned a lot. And been really impressed by your mission and your ambition for territorial development. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for the invitation to this very interesting series of interviews. And I hope that what I said has been at least a bit interesting and inspirational for you and the viewers of this interview. And well, all the best with the further.
You were listening to the podcast Inclusive Urban Futures with Dr. Rosenfeld. Please stay tuned for the next episode.